The soft clinking of glasses, the low murmur of conversations, and the occasional sizzle from the open kitchen were the usual background music at Jackson's Grill, a well-established restaurant in a modest Texas town where the menu hadn't changed much in over a decade, but nobody minded. It was the kind of place where people ordered the same meal every Friday, sat at the same table, and greeted the same waitress by name. That waitress was Emily Carter. At 29, she had worked at Jackson's for 7 years. She wore the same crisp black uniform every evening, always pressed, always clean. Her honey brown hair was tied back in a no-nonsense bun, and her shoes, though worn, were polished. Emily moved through the dining room with a quiet confidence, balancing plates with ease, catching drop utensils before they hit the ground, and offering a calm smile that seemed to make everyone feel a bit more at ease. Everyone except, perhaps, the table at the back corner that night. It was a Friday, always the busiest. A group of 5 businessmen had taken the largest booth, already loud and a little impatient. They ordered expensive steaks, double bourbons, and expected the staff to serve them like a 5-star hotel would. Emily approached their table just as the kitchen experienced a short delay. One of the orders had been accidentally duplicated, and the chef had to start over. She explained the delay with practiced politeness. "Gentlemen, I apologize for the slight wait. Your entrees will be out shortly. Can I get you anything in the meantime?" The man seated at the center, a silver-haired executive in a navy suit that screamed money, narrowed his eyes at her. He looked her up and down, annoyed. The rest of the table fell silent as he sneered. "You should move faster," he snapped. "After all, you're just a waitress." For a moment, the words hung in the air like the smell of burnt toast. Emily blinked once. Her fingers tightened slightly around the tray she held, but her face didn't change. She gave him a polite nod, the kind that revealed nothing, and said softly, "I'll check on it right away." She turned and walked back toward the kitchen. A few regulars who had overheard the comment exchanged glances. Some looked down at their food. Others stared at the man with barely concealed disdain. But no one said anything. Emily didn't stop moving. She returned the tray, helped another server with a coffee refill, and passed by the bar to grab a drink order, all with the same steady rhythm. But inside her chest, something shifted. It wasn't the insult itself. She had heard worse. It was the way it was delivered, the entitlement, the assumption, the ease with which someone who had never worked a 12-hour shift, who had never scraped together tips to cover rent, could decide what she was worth. As the night wore on, she kept moving. She smiled when needed, nodded in the right places, delivered every order with care. But something behind her eyes had gone still. The kind of stillness that isn't passive. It waits. It plans. By the time the kitchen closed and the chairs were flipped onto tables, Emily had already finished cleaning her section. The lights dimmed, the last receipts were tallied, and the tired laughter of the remaining staff echoed in the empty dining room. "Good night, called one of the bartenders as he grabbed his jacket. "Night, Marcus," she replied. She grabbed her own bag from the back room, walked to the parking lot, and climbed into her 10-year-old sedan. She started the engine but didn't drive off. Instead, she sat there, both hands on the steering wheel, staring straight ahead. Just a waitress. The words came back to her again. They didn't hurt. Not anymore. But they rang like a bell in the quiet of the car. She exhaled through her nose. Then, slowly, she reached into her bag, pulled out her phone, and opened her email. Her fingers hovered for a moment over the screen. Then she began to type. To Paul Jackson. Subject: Request for a conversation. "Mr. Jackson, I hope this message finds you well. I'd like to schedule a time to speak with you about the future of the restaurant. I believe it's a conversation worth having." She read the message once, then hit send. There was no dramatic music, no trembling hand, just a quiet, focused woman sitting in an old car outside a modest restaurant. She placed the phone down beside her, shifted into reverse, and drove off into the Texas night. No one at the restaurant knew she had saved every bonus, that she had inherited a small property years ago and rented it out, that she had studied financial management online between shifts, or that she had read every line of the restaurant's public filings and industry reports just for practice. No one knew she was watching everything. Inventory wastage, employee turnover, supplier delays, revenue dips on weekdays, and calculating solutions in her head. She never corrected the assumption that she was just a waitress. But that night, something ended. Not her shift, not just her patience. It was a silence. She had worn it like armor for years. And now, for the first time, she was going to use it as a weapon, not to fight, but to take what she had already earned. The restaurant would open again tomorrow. The same faces, the same routines. But Emily Carter would not be the same. She wasn't going to explain herself. She wasn't going to argue. She wasn't going to ask for permission. She was going to own it, and no one would see it coming. Emily unlocked the front door of her small apartment just past midnight. The worn carpet and quiet hum of the refrigerator greeted her like old friends. She didn't turn on the lights. The moonlight pouring through the window was enough. She set her bag on the counter and slipped off her shoes with mechanical precision. There was no need for reflection tonight. Her mind was already racing ahead. She poured a glass of water, sat at the small kitchen table that doubled as her study desk, and opened her laptop. She did not reread the email she had sent Paul Jackson. There was no doubt, no hesitation. Her browser already had tabs open from previous nights. Financial projections, franchise reports, staff scheduling models. She had been gathering data in silence, watching the restaurant like a chessboard where the players didn't even know they were being observed. For 4 years, between double shifts and holiday weekends, she had taken online business courses from a state university, slowly, one class at a time. She never mentioned it. Not to coworkers, not to friends. It wasn't secrecy, it was strategy. Outside, the streets were quiet. Inside, Emily reviewed a spreadsheet tracking Jackson's monthly revenue for the past 3 years. She already knew the numbers by heart, but she checked them anyway. A decline had begun slowly during the pandemic and never fully corrected itself. Most staff assumed it was just the economy. Emily knew better. The problem wasn't demand. It was inefficiency. Jackson's Grill was running on reputation, not evolution. Suppliers were inconsistent. Digital marketing was non-existent. And the menu hadn't been updated since Emily started working there. She clicked through her files, a revised menu draft, vendor contracts she had negotiated hypothetically, a breakdown of labor costs under a new scheduling model. She had already estimated her margins. She knew how much she'd need to invest in renovations and how long until the return. It wasn't a dream. It was math. She glanced at her phone. No reply from Paul yet, but she hadn't expected one right away. It was late, and Paul didn't check emails after 9 o'clock in the evening. She closed her laptop, stood, and walked to the small bedroom where a single bookshelf was stacked with binders and business books, each one marked with tabs and sticky notes. She didn't need motivation. She needed timing. And for the first time in years, the moment felt near. The next morning, she returned to work as usual. Her uniform was ironed, her hair was neat, and her manner unchanged. If anyone had expected her to be rattled by the previous night's insult, they would have been surprised. Emily was focused. She moved through the morning prep with precision, checking stock levels and noting the consistent underordering of key ingredients, another item for her mental list. She helped the line cook organize the station, refilled the napkin dispensers, and welcomed the early lunch crowd with the same even tone. Paul Jackson arrived just after noon. He was rarely at the restaurant in the mornings anymore. His steps were slower than they had been years ago, his posture more tired. He still wore his signature denim button-up and the same weathered cowboy boots he had probably owned since the 80s. Emily noticed he had read the email. His nod to her was thoughtful, more deliberate. "Emily," he said, stopping beside the counter. "Got your message. Let's talk tomorrow morning, before we open." "Of course," she replied. "What time works best?" "Come by around 8, he said. "I'll unlock the place." She nodded once. No thanks, no nervous energy, just confirmation. Then she turned to greet a table near the window, leaving Paul watching her for a second longer than usual before heading to his office. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Emily moved between tables, the kitchen, and the register without breaking stride. She didn't speak of the upcoming meeting. She didn't speculate. That night, after the final table left and the staff began stacking chairs, she lingered behind, wiping down the bar top slowly. One of the younger servers, Claire, leaned on the counter and said, "How do you keep so calm when people are rude like that?" Emily looked up, her cloth paused mid-wipe. She didn't flinch. "You don't give them what they want," she said simply. Claire raised an eyebrow. "Which is what?" "Proof they were right," Emily replied, and resumed cleaning. Claire laughed, unsure whether it was a joke. Emily didn't laugh with her. She finished the task, clocked out, and left for the night. At home, she didn't open her laptop this time. She didn't need to rehearse. She went to bed early, slept without interruption, and woke before her alarm. She dressed in a plain blue blouse and dark jeans. Not a uniform, but not too casual. When she arrived at Jackson's Grill the next morning, the parking lot was still empty. A single car, Paul's truck, was parked near the back. She knocked on the side door, and he opened a moment later. Inside, the restaurant felt different in the early morning quiet. No clatter, no orders being called, just the hum of refrigeration units and the soft creak of old floorboards. Paul gestured for her to sit at one of the corner booths. He poured himself a cup of coffee and sat across from her. "So," he began, "you said you want to talk about the future of the restaurant." Emily met his gaze directly. "Yes, I've been thinking about it for a while now. I have a proposal prepared. I'd like to buy Jackson's Grill." Paul blinked, not in shock, but interest. "That's a big leap. I've run the numbers. I know the state of the business. I know the staff, and I know the market. I've spent the last 4 years preparing for this." "You have capital?" "I do," she said. "Between investments, savings, and a property I rent out, I can cover the down payment and initial upgrades without external financing." Paul took a sip of coffee, watching her over the rim of the cup. "You've been planning this a while, haven't you?" "I have." He nodded slowly, tapping his fingers on the table. "You've been the most dependable person here for years. Never late. Never asked for much. Quiet but sharp. I just didn't realize you were thinking about taking it all." "I'm not here to take it," Emily said. "I'm here to continue it. But better." Paul chuckled softly. "That sounds like something my wife would have said. She ran this place tighter than I ever did. She would have liked you." They sat in silence for a moment, not the heavy silence of insult or dismissal, but the weight of consideration. Paul wasn't a sentimental man, but he wasn't careless either. "I'll need to think about it," he finally said. "I wasn't planning to sell this year, but I've been tired. And truth be told, I didn't know who to leave it to." Emily stood. "Take your time. I'll be here." Paul nodded. As she left, he looked down at his coffee, steam rising in slow curls. For the first time in years, he saw the restaurant not as a burden, but as something that could thrive without him. Emily walked out into the bright Texas morning, without a word. There was no triumph yet, only momentum, and she never once looked back. The days that followed moved with a quiet intensity. Emily kept her routine unbroken, yet every action now carried a deeper current. When she restocked condiments or entered supply orders, she wasn't just doing it out of habit. She was evaluating, watching, weighing each element of the operation, not as a waitress, but as a prospective owner. Her posture remained as straight as ever, her voice as calm, but something had changed in the eyes of those around her. They noticed how she paused longer in the office, how she asked questions about delivery schedules, how she offered subtle suggestions that Paul actually listened to. A few whispers started among the staff, but no one was bold enough to ask her directly. Then, late on a Wednesday afternoon, Paul Jackson called her into the office. The door clicked shut behind her, and he gestured to the chair opposite his desk. She sat, hands resting gently in her lap. "I've been thinking about your offer," he said, his voice low but clear. She gave a small nod. "I assumed as much." Paul leaned back in his chair, studying her with a kind of quiet curiosity. "When you sent that email, I figured you had something in mind, but I didn't expect this level of preparation. I don't believe in stepping into something unless I understand every part of it. she replied. I can see that, he said. He slid a folder across the desk. This is what I'm willing to offer if we move forward. Emily opened the folder. The terms were not only fair, they were respectful. Paul had listed a sale price just under what she had projected, with provisions for a gradual transition and minimal disruption to staff operations. He was not trying to bleed her dry, nor was he trying to hold on to control. It was a clean offer, honest. I don't need to negotiate this, she said after a moment. It's better than I expected. Paul nodded. You've earned that, but before we sign anything, I want to say something. Emily raised her eyes. When my wife died, I kept this place running because it was ours. She put her soul into it. The systems, the food, the way we treated customers. That was her. After she passed, I kept the doors open, but my heart wasn't in it anymore. I've just been keeping it alive. But watching you these past few weeks, I saw something familiar. You care the way she did. You pay attention to the little things. You're not just trying to make money. You're trying to make it work. Make it better. Emily held his gaze. I'm not trying to erase what you built. I want to build on it. That's what good ownership looks like. Paul smiled faintly, a rare sight. Then let's do this. They spent the next hour reviewing logistics. There were licenses to transfer, accounts to audit, suppliers to notify. Paul promised to remain available during the transition, but made it clear he wouldn't hover. He didn't want to become a shadow at the door. He wanted to hand it over and walk away with peace. By the time Emily stepped out of the office, the late sun was casting a warm orange hue across the dining room. She walked the length of the restaurant, running her fingers lightly across the back of each booth as she passed. The same table she had wiped down hundreds of times now looked different, not just familiar. Hers. In the days that followed, everything began to shift behind the scenes. Emily met with the restaurant accountant and attorney, quietly signing documents and preparing the new ownership paperwork. She reviewed every supplier contract, renegotiated terms, and finalized the rebranding plan that would be implemented gradually to avoid alarming loyal customers. There was no rush. Her strength was in the details. She also scheduled one-on-one meetings with each staff member, asking questions they weren't used to answering. What did they think wasn't working? What would they change if they could? Some offered hesitant replies, surprised by her sudden authority. Others opened up with relief, eager for someone to finally listen. Emily took notes on every conversation, promising nothing, but remembering everything. On the Friday before the official handover, Paul hosted a staff meeting. Everyone gathered in the main dining room, some clutching coffee cups, others wiping flour from their aprons. Paul stood near the register with Emily beside him, a subtle but unmistakable symbol of the passing torch. I won't take up too much of your time, Paul began. Most of you know I've been at this a long while. This place has meant everything to me and to my late wife. But I've reached a point where I know it's time to step back. And I'm proud to say I'm leaving Jackson's Grill in good hands. He turned slightly, nodding toward Emily. This place isn't going to someone who doesn't understand it. It's going to someone who's been right here with you, doing the hard work, day in and day out. Emily Carter is the new owner of this restaurant. A ripple of surprise moved through the room. A few mouths opened in disbelief. One of the line cooks glanced around, as if waiting for someone to confirm it was real. Claire, the young server who had once asked about rude customers, let out a quiet, stunned wow. Emily stepped forward. She didn't raise her voice, didn't clear her throat. She simply began to speak. I want to thank Paul for trusting me with something he built with heart and history. I'm not here to change everything overnight, but I am here to lead. And I want each of you to know that I see your work. I see your hours, your effort, your dedication. And moving forward, I want this place to reflect that, not just to our customers, but to each of you. She let the silence hang for a moment. I'll be meeting with each of you again soon. But for now, I just want you to know, this is the end of Jackson's Grill. It's a new chapter, and I want us to write it together. There was no applause, no cheers, but the silence that followed was not awkward. It was full of something unspoken, recognition, perhaps, and a quiet respect. After the meeting, Paul clapped a hand on her shoulder. "You'll do just fine," he said. "Better than I did." That night, Emily didn't stay late. She left after her shift like everyone else. But for the first time, she didn't walk to her car as an employee. She walked as the owner. And no one, absolutely no one, had seen it coming. The papers were signed on a Tuesday morning in a quiet office just off Main Street. There were no cameras, no headlines, no ceremonial handshakes, just a notary, a thin stack of contracts, and 2 steady signatures. Emily Carter's name appeared beside Paul Jackson's on each line, clean and deliberate, without hesitation. When the last page was signed, Paul closed the folder with finality and slid it across the desk toward her. "It's all yours now," he said, the corners of his mouth tugging into a tired but genuine smile. Emily nodded once. There was no display of emotion, no laughter or tears, just a deep, solid breath as if her lungs had been waiting for this one for years. She gathered the folder, stood, and thanked him, not with platitudes or overreaching gratitude, but with the simple gravity of someone who understood what she had just received. Outside, the air was thick with the late Texas summer. Emily walked the short distance back to the restaurant alone, not out of secrecy, but necessity. This moment was not meant to be shared. It belonged to her and her alone. As she approached the front door of Jackson's Grill, now legally hers, she paused for the briefest second before pushing it open. Inside, the morning crew was already working through prep. Pots clanged in the kitchen. Orders were being organized for lunch. The smell of fresh bread and sautéed onions filled the air. A couple of early diners sipped coffee by the windows. Everything looked exactly the same, but the weight of ownership changed everything. She walked past the counter and into the small staff room, set her things down, then stepped back out and addressed the floor supervisor quietly. "I'm not in uniform today. Could you ask everyone to meet me in 10 minutes by the bar?" The woman nodded, eyes flickering with curiosity. No one had seen Emily out of uniform before, during working hours. When the staff gathered, they found her standing at the center of the room in a deep navy blouse and tailored slacks. The air shifted as they realized this wasn't just another team update. "I know Paul shared the news with you last week." Emily began, her tone measured, clear. "Today it's official. As of this morning, I am a new owner of Jackson's Grill." She waited a moment. Some of the staff looked at one another, unsure how to react. A few nodded. Others stared, eyes wide, still digesting what had just been confirmed. "I want to start by saying this. No one here is losing their job. No major changes will happen overnight. But we will be evolving. We'll start slowly, menu adjustments, kitchen workflow, supplier reviews. And I will be involving each of you in these decisions. If this place is going to grow, it's going to grow with the people who've kept it alive all these years." There was still no applause. Emily hadn't expected any, but she saw in their posture the shift, the reevaluation. They were looking at her differently now, some with curiosity, some with admiration, a few with disbelief, but all with attention. By mid-afternoon, the energy in the restaurant had changed subtly. The staff moved with a new awareness. Customers were greeted with sharper focus. Dishes came out faster, cleaner, more precise. Emily didn't issue commands. She adjusted workflows, observed patterns, offered quiet feedback. She stood in the back with a line cook, discussing prep batch sizes, then spent 15 minutes with a hostess reviewing customer feedback trends. She moved like she always had, present but unobtrusive. Yet the difference was unmistakable. The next day, she began rolling out minor changes. The uniforms were updated first, not replaced, but refined. Cleaner cuts, better fabric, small embroidered name patches that offered a touch of dignity. The signage of the entrance received a subtle redesign. The font was sleeker, the paint fresher. She didn't rename the place. Jackson's Grill stayed Jackson's Grill, but she added something beneath the name in elegant lettering. Established 1986. Reimagined 2025. Customers began to notice. They asked about the new presentation, the tighter service. One older couple who'd been eating there for 20 years commented, "Feels like the old Jackson's again, only sharper." By Saturday night, the restaurant was at full capacity. The buzz of conversation filled the air. clinking glasses punctuating the soundscape. Emily stood behind the counter, watching everything unfold with clinical calm. She wasn't waiting tables tonight. She was orchestrating, coordinating, ensuring every moving part held its rhythm. Around 8 o'clock, the doors opened, and in walked the same group of businessmen from the week before. The same table, the same routine. Only now, something was different. Emily saw them immediately. She didn't flinch, didn't avert her eyes. One of the men recognized her as they were seated and did a slight double take. "Well, look who's still here," he said, smirking as she passed. "Guess being just a waitress suits you after all." She turned slightly, offered a polite smile. "I hope you enjoy your evening. Let me know if there's anything I can do to improve your experience." He laughed, nudging the man beside him. Still got that attitude. Emily moved on without reacting. She didn't need to. The moment had already begun to turn. 10 minutes later, the table's drinks arrived. The service was flawless. When their food came out, it was hot, perfectly timed, and plated with precision. They began to settle in, confident the evening would continue like any other, until one of them, stretching his legs, glanced toward the front of the restaurant. There, next to the host stand, was the updated signage board. Jackson's Grill, established 1986. Reimagined 2025. Owner, Emily Carter. The man froze. The others followed his gaze. The smirk faded. Silence replaced their laughter. None of them said a word. Not one apology. Not one attempt at explanation. Emily passed their table, once more on her way to check the bar. One of the men glanced up, clearly unsure of what to say. She offered the same calm smile, the same steady gaze. "Everything to your satisfaction?" she asked. He nodded, eyes lowered. Yes, thank you." She walked on. The staff had noticed. Whispers passed quickly between stations. Claire gave her a subtle nod from across the room. The bartender, who had known her the longest, shook his head in quiet awe. At the end of the night, the restaurant emptied out slowly. A few regulars lingered at their tables. The lights were dimmed, the music turned low. As Emily made her final rounds through the dining room, someone at the far corner clapped quietly. Then another. Soon, a gentle round of applause echoed softly across the space. Not loud, not performative, just enough to be felt. She nodded once in acknowledgement, then stepped into the kitchen. There was still work to be done. The first Sunday under Emily's ownership dawned early, quiet and still. While most of the town remained asleep or slowly shuffled into church pews and diners, Emily was already walking the restaurant floor, noted with exacting eyes the shine on the wood, the space in between tables, the positioning of every framed photo on the wall. She moved with precision, but without rush. This wasn't inspection, it was stewardship. Everything she now touched held her name, but more importantly, her responsibility. By mid-morning, a small team of contractors arrived. She had arranged for discreet modifications to be done while the restaurant remained closed until the evening. No construction noise, no disruptive changes, only upgrades that mattered. Improved kitchen lighting, better ventilation near the grill station, updated point-of-sale systems for front staff, things that customers would never comment on directly. But that would be felt in the smoothness of service, the speed of orders, the calm in the kitchen. The changes extended beyond the physical. That afternoon, she held her first closed-door staff meeting in the new upstairs office space she had quietly converted from the old storage loft. Everyone arrived on time. Clean uniforms, attentive expressions, more curiosity than apprehension. She stood at the front of the room, a whiteboard behind her, a small table beside her with folders neatly labeled with each staff member's name. She didn't lecture. She didn't praise. She laid out a plan. The first part was financial. She would be implementing a new bonus structure tied to performance and consistency. Not arbitrary targets, but metrics that each role could influence. Inventory control, customer feedback scores, punctuality, and team cohesion. Every position mattered. The second part was culture. Monthly feedback sessions, cross-training for anyone interested, and internal promotion as the new standard. No more outsiders brought in to manage people who had already done the work for years. When she finished, she looked around the room and said, "This is no longer just a job for any of us. It's a partnership. I'm not here to run this place above you. I'm here to run it with you. If you're here to grow, I will make sure you do." No one clapped. No one needed to. The silence that followed was full and focused. That evening, the restaurant reopened. It was not advertised as a relaunch. No banners, no announcements, no changes that screamed for attention. The lighting felt warmer. The music, subtle but modern. The menu had been adjusted slightly, simplified, refined. A few outdated dishes removed, a handful of locally inspired plates introduced. The print was clearer, the descriptions tighter, the pricing adjusted just enough to reflect quality without alienating regulars. By 7 o'clock, every table was full. Emily moved from section to section, not as a server, but as a presence, checking in with staff, making eye contact with guests, adjusting a crooked salt shaker here, a water pitcher there. Her rhythm hadn't changed, but her role had. She didn't shadow anyone, didn't hover. She was everywhere and nowhere at once, watchful, measured, calm. And then, as if choreographed by fate, the group of businessmen returned. They entered as they had before, full of laughter and half-finished jokes, eyes scanning the room for their usual booth. The hostess, now trained to recognize them, greeted them without hesitation and walked them to their seat. Their arrival no longer sparked anxiety among the staff. Now it sparked something closer to curiosity. As the men settled in, one of them looked around, sensing something different. His eyes narrowed as he glanced at the ceiling lights, the subtly updated table settings, the quiet energy in the air. "Place looks different," he muttered. Another nodded. "Feels sharper somehow." They barely noticed when Emily walked past their table. No tray in hand, no apron, just her, composed and observant. One of them turned toward her with an almost confused smile. "Didn't expect to see you again," he said, trying to keep his voice light. She looked at him for a moment, her expression unreadable but polite. "I'm always here," she replied. "Enjoy your evening." The men ordered. Their food came out precisely on time. Every plate perfect. The service impeccable, unshakable. They joked less this time. Their conversation quieter. One of them, while sipping his whiskey, finally looked up and said, "You know, I think that's the same girl from last time." Another frowned. "Can't be. She's not wearing the uniform." "No, I'm telling you, it is." They turned their heads slightly, just enough to read the small gold-lettered sign at the front of the restaurant, right under the restaurant name, subtly placed where guests signed up for reservations. Owner, Emily Carter. The silence that followed at their table was heavier than any insult could have been. Not a single word was exchanged for several minutes. The man who had first made the comment about her being just a waitress didn't speak again for the rest of the meal. Later, as they stood to leave, their eyes found her again, this time with hesitation. Emily was by the kitchen doors, speaking with the cook about preparation times. She noticed them, nodded once, and continued her conversation. She did not smile. She did not acknowledge their recognition. She didn't need to. When they left, the staff relaxed collectively, though no one said a word about it. It wasn't necessary. Everyone had seen it. Everyone had felt it. As the night drew to a close and the last of the tables were cleared, Emily walked out into the main dining room and paused near the bar. Claire approached her, holding 2 glasses of water. She handed one over without a word. "Did you see their faces?" she asked after a moment. Emily took a sip, then placed the glass down. "I saw enough." Claire shook her head in quiet disbelief. "You didn't even have to say anything." "I wasn't planning to." They stood there in companionable silence. Around them, the restaurant buzzed with the final movements of the night. Silverware being counted, receipts being tallied, the last chairs turned upside down. It was all ordinary. And yet, tonight, everything had shifted. No applause, no dramatic declarations. Just a woman who had been overlooked, dismissed, and underestimated. And now in the very room she used to serve in, without raising her voice, without demanding recognition, without ever needing to retaliate. Because some victories don't require noise. They just require presence. and permanence. And Emily Carter had both.